Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome to the Last Round, episode 195. No Danny Z today, and I have a fellow Brit back to cover the big fights. I think a good choice, got a lot of UK fights. We've got the Joyce, Tyson Fury, Melee. So today I have with me Alan Dawson from The Insider. Thank you for joining me, Alan.
Hey, pleasure. Thanks for having me back. 195 shows is great. You guys are killing it.
I know, 195 regular weekly ones, and then I think it's must be like 230, 240, including like the shows we do like on scene in camps and gyms and stuff like that. I don't know, maybe even more. I don't know. But let's jump straight into it. Fight reviews, Friday the 23rd of September, Prudential Center, New Jersey, on ESPN over here. Shakur Stevenson moved to 19-0 with a unanimous decision 12 over Robson at Conceição with scorecards 117-109, 118-108, 117-109. This was for Robson Conceição, this was for the WBC and WBO super featherweight titles due to Shakur Stevenson coming in, I believe, 1.6 pounds over the contracted limit. To start with, Alan, what did you think of, Shakur Stevenson coming in overweight?
I'm not like... I try and keep it consistent because whenever other athletes have done it, as long as it's not a repeat offender, I'm not like one of those people that's, as long as the fight still happens, I'm not that mad at it. If he was going to go up to 140 anyway, which it seems like he always was, I don't think it really takes too much away from it. But if an athlete, we had it with MMA recently where someone came in at least like 8 pounds overweight. And it's like, what the hell are you playing at if you're doing it that way? But yeah, what was it, 1.6 pounds overweight, the fight goes ahead. Is it going to impact the actual, performance and result? Not too sure. And it was the first time he's done it. So for me, the weight miss didn't really bother me too much. But the thing with Shakur is that he's so talented, and he's definitely I don't think I would have him in top 10 pound for pound just yet, but that's not a reflection on him. It's more a reflection on how we're just in a good era of boxing. Some people don't have Devin Haney and Jamel Charlo on there. I definitely do. I think if you're undisputed, how can you not be in the top 10? Especially Jamel Charlo, he should be like top, in the top 6. But some people don't have those on there, and they've got Shakur on. I think Shakur's there, almost there. And especially if he goes on to do well at 140, then I'd squeeze him in. But the thing with Shakur, and we saw him in at the MGM Grand. He's so highly skilled. Like skill level alone, he's pound for pound. It's just not there for his achievements in the sport yet. But he's definitely going to achieve over and over again. But when I watch him, I feel like sometimes you watch the same fights, like he's got the talent to drop his opponent, but it just doesn't seem like he then closes the show, with the finish. But then he goes on to, produce these 120, 108, 119, 109 scorecards. Maybe it's just the fact that, some people do knock everyone out up until the point where they get to 16-0, 16 knockouts, and then they suddenly step up in class, and then the power kind of equalizes with other people's talents, and then they start grinding out the decision wins, and maybe he's at that level already. But I think there's still another gear to him. Don't really think he's playing with his food per se, but maybe he's just. Don't really know what I'm trying to say. I just feel like there's more. I want to see more from him, but I'm greedy. I just think like if he there was parts in that fight that the opportunity seemed to be there, and he was doing more than enough to win the round. But I just think he could have probably had opportunities there to properly put him away.
Who would you like to see greet him at lightweight?
At lightweight, or lightweight. I mean, Devin Haney's right there. I think it's got realistically, it's going to be a top rank fight. Lomachenko, probably. But I think the fact Haney and Stevenson, that to me can be sold pretty well. You know, two really highly skilled Americans who are, you know, young enough to be able to do a rematch down the line. And you know, how can that fight not bang when it's, you know, regardless of who you are, like I mentioned earlier, like a few minutes ago, you're probably going to have one, if not both of them, in your top 10. And to be able to get that fight sooner rather than later, or both sooner and later, that's the one I would kind of have my eye on. I think other fights, you know, that's when you run into the issues of like probably not promote a rivalry, more just like broadcast agreements that are in place. I think some promoters more likely, especially the ones in America, are more likely to work with each other. It just depends on whether that fighter is tied up with, you know, what a broadcast. You know, Gervonta Davis, he's not really fought anyone with that big of a name yet. The person who is fighting the people with the names is Haney and Tio. And again, Tio, that's another top rank in-house fight that can be made. The ones that I don't think will be made anytime soon is Tank and Ryan Garcia. Ryan, because he's mostly moved up to 140 himself now anyway. But from what I was hearing, if Garcia and Tank fought at the end of this year, that seemed like it was probably going to happen at 135 rather than 140. But yeah, Tio and Loma, and I mean, oh my God, Top Rank have got that division almost tied up, haven't they? When you think of those four names, and you can just have them all fighting each other for multiple times over the space of the next 3 years, and whoever's the last one standing, Jesus.
Do you think that there'll be a bit of an argument over, you know, shortly in the coming weeks? We've got Devin Haney is going to fight, you know, Kambosos again, and going off, you know, what we saw in the first fight, I assume that, you know, Devin Haney is going to come on victorious. I'm sure you're going to get Team Loma, you know, Team Shakur Stevenson, you know, just knocking on Bob Arum's door, calling for that fight. Just give us a guess who you think will get that fight, you know, for the undisputed.
I don't know how Top Rank actually play it, because I mean, for me, I find it crazy that people still have Loma in their top 10. Like, I think he's like he's being on the downhill from where he was at the peak. He's still at a high level, but he's not a top 10 pound for pound fighter anymore. And it's crazy that I think people are still ranking him ahead of, again, like I say earlier, when you're not even ranking Jamel Charlo, who's, you know, peaking or has peaked, and he's still fighting, you know, top contenders. But you know, with Haney coming back from Australia for a second time, and yeah, he's going to beat him again. He might even turn it up a notch. You know, I don't mind them doing that fight again, because, you know, Haney's just fulfilling his contractual obligations. You know, to do it the first time in Australia, come back, he really should have had not a hero's welcome, but you know, when you have like you see fighters from like MMA fighters in like Czech Republic, or boxers from, you know, not these established hotbeds, and they go home, there's just, you know, there is a hero's welcome. Haney should have had that, really. America's so big that maybe it's quite hard to organize, you know, and where would be the welcome? I think he lives and trains here in Vegas, rather than where he was born. I don't think he was born here. But you know, whether you throw Lomachenko in with him, thinking, I don't know, I've got Haney in that fight pretty easily. I don't know, if I quite like matching. I still think Tio's got a lot to give. I feel like he went through a year of, you know, his the way he came up, and fighting fighting Loma when he did, that was a real statement win, and it was probably the one of the top wins of the last, you know, 5-6 years, up there with probably Fury and Klitschko, maybe, because I don't think many people were really picking Tio at the time, and it wasn't a lucky win. You know, that was just great game plan. he stuck to this, delivered on that strategy in a way that was, not a close fight. It was convincing. And then it was just, then losing to Cambosis, he just kind of declined, and there then just seemed to be a bit of delusion in what he was saying. But hopefully he's come out of that and kind of accepted defeat and can know that he can still hang at the very top of the 135 division. I think him and Haney would really deliver, but it's just whether you think, who's really out of those 4 fighters, who do you think, no matter who, as long as you kept, say, maybe Stevenson and Haney apart, are they just naturally going to meet in a final? Is that kind of, if those are the top 2 out of the 4, if you're top ranked, do you think is it better to like progress that in like a unofficial 4-man tournament? You kind of want the number 1 seed and the number 2 seed in opposite brackets. Is that kind of how you would rank them? I'd probably put one. Probably would have one at 135. I would have Haney at number 1, just because it is his division and he's got all the belts. Stevenson's so skilled that I can't not put him at 2. Teo 3, Loma 4. That's kind of how I would have it.
Yeah, I agree. So, I don't know if I think was Teo going to stay up at 140 though. That's the because his last was at 140, right?
I would. Can he still come down? I thought he would still be able to come down. Like Ryan Garcia kind of fluctuate a little bit. Is he set at 140?
So that would be. I wonder if he would come down, if he would make the weight for that, for those sorts of round robins and the money that they're gonna attract. Because at 140 now with, Josh Taylor's, pretty much given up all those belts, hasn't he? It's going to be interesting to see, what they do there. Because, I think the fight that they were looking at putting him in with is what Arnold Barboza, a check against Arnold Barboza or a check against any of those, Devin Haney, Lomachenko, Shakur Stevenson. I think I would probably starve myself for £5.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I don't know. We were, I don't want to say we're sold a lie because the promoters never put it out like this, but I think maybe it was media and fans getting carried away with like this new big 4. Yeah, Ryan Garcia would have been one of those, and then Tank, but then since then things have progressed a little bit. But I still kind of want to see, when there's so many fighters that are so close in weight, if not at the same weight, I just want to see them get it on. And I put Teo in there just because he's shown the desire to actually do it and go in with, who at the time was Loma at that time was in the top 10 pound for pound, and he went in and beat him. I don't think he would be, I don't think any of these fighters are scared, but I think he would be more willing to, put it on the line again, seeing as he's already done it before. Same as Haney, these guys, to their credit, they've already gone into the fire. Stevenson is kind of in the way, has done as well. Oscar Valdez, quite decorated and a tough guy.
Would you say that those people you just mentioned have put themselves up against better opponents than Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia so far? Those are the last 2 of those 5 to test themselves.
Yeah. Like trying to keep it impartially. Yeah, I think with Tank, the way he knocked out Leo Santa Cruz was just horribly but beautifully violent. That was Wilder-esque for me. Like what Gervonta Davis is doing and has done between 130 and 140, for me, is exactly what Deontay Wilder was doing at heavyweight. And in a way, the level of competition is quite similar as well. Leo Santa Cruz, he wasn't established at the weight he fought Gervonta at. Mario Barrios was a good win at 140, but he was a top 4, top 5 kind of guy. Valdez for Stevenson was ranked higher, I believe. And those are 2 of Tank's best wins. For Tank to be up, for Tank to get that sort of commendation, he would have to go in there with Ryan Garcia. You know, that's the fight. I think every time I've been on your show, I've always said that's the fight I want to see, or one of the top 2, top 3 fights I want to see most in all of boxing that could, you know, potentially happen. And with Ryan Garcia, like his best wins, probably Luke Campbell. He was dropped, got off the canvas, and then stopped Luke Campbell. Good win, but again, Luke Campbell's not on the same level as Oscar Valdez. Yeah, yeah. I think it's fair to say that they've got better quality wins than Tank and Ryan. Although I think Tank's just his power is just such an equalizer. As much as people praise Deontay Wilder over the years for just having, you know, he can lose round after round and after round and then put someone on their back for good for minutes on end in the 11th round. That's exactly what Gervonta Davis can do. I don't think you can count him out from any fight because it just doesn't matter if he's dropping rounds, as long as he is figuring out where his opponent is going to be at the precise time they're going to throw a certain shot and then get there in time to just do what he did to Leo Santa Cruz and just send this horrendous uppercut that just, you know, it makes someone look that they're not even well. It's sickening. And I'm saying that with a smile because I like seeing it.
Yeah, no, it was a great fight and a great finish by Gervonta. Put a percentage on that we will see Davis Garcia by the end of the year.
So I do like to speak to Leonard Ellaby. You know, he's here in Vegas as well, and I think you know he's very approachable. I actually haven't spoken to him about this for this fight for since it's been rumored, but I'm actually getting good feelings from it. I've got very good feelings about Spence and Crawford, but as the weeks go on, like I was like, if we were going to grade it out of 10, I was thinking that fight was pretty much 9 out of 10 happening. I think in July, I was reporting that it was happening in November, and I was getting that from like really, you know, people that are very close to the fight. Spoken to them since, and like their messaging was basically, you know, this wasn't their words, but it just sounded like it was cross the T's, dot the I's sort of thing. But it just feels like, you know, we're in September the 28th now. That the date I was always being told was November the 19th for Spence Crawford. It's only 7 weeks away. It's not long. You know, it feels like if it's not going to be announced next week, it's a 6 week. To be fair, I think McGregor and Mayweather was announced very close to it happening in May, but it feels 6 weeks feels like that's when, if it's not going to be announced in the 6th week, counting down 5 weeks, then it's probably going to be pushed for some reason. If not, there's just hit some sort of snag. But with Garcia and Davis, I don't have it that high. Like now, you know, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd have said like 9 out of 10. I'm sure Spence Crawford is happening on November 19th. Now I think that's dipped to maybe 8. But Tank and Garcia, you know, a month ago or 2 months ago, I might have said, oh, you know, maybe 1 out of 10. Now I'm thinking it's more like 5 or 6. It feels like you know, there's decent conversations seemingly happening behind closed doors. You know, if one of them loses in the next 6 months or 9 months, 6 months, that might feel a little bit cruel, but you know, in the next year and they haven't fought, that fight works because they're both undefeated, they're both young, you know, they're both in America, they've both got different types of fan bases, but those different types of fan bases are really locked into those guys. You know, Tank can sell out arenas and generate pay-per-views no matter where he's fighting in America. That's like incredible to be able to have built him to the level where he can sell 200,000 pay-per-views and generate millions of dollars in gate receipts, regardless of whether he's fighting in Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York, where's he from? Baltimore. You know, he could do that in Vegas. That's a Vegas fight with Garcia. And then you've got, you know, it seems like maybe the promotions are still involved. So you've got, you know, on that stage, you'd have Leonard Ellaby and Floyd Mayweather. And then on the opposite side, Oscar De La Hoya, Bernard Hopkins, and Ryan Garcia. How much star power do you want? You know, I don't think there can be any fight in boxing that can be made where you could have 6 people with as big name value as those guys all on a stage talking the good you know, that's going to, like, you know, drive clicks, generate interest, and build up a really good fight between two young American athletes. I think it would be huge. You know, that if Wilder and Fury was selling to 750, 800,000 people in that second fight, I think it generated a similar number in the third. I don't see why Garcia and Tank can't do pretty much those numbers, just based on the, you know, if you were doing it would probably be, have to be a split broadcast type of thing, which is what sunk Munguia and the Charlo fight earlier in the year. But I don't know, PBC's connections and Mayweather Promotions connections outside of boxing are very like significant. The fact that they can get, or maybe not get, but the fact that some of the athletes they have on their roster, Tank is one, Errol Spence is another, I think the Charlos as well, but they resonate with other athletes who have huge followings on social media. And when they're tweeting or Instagramming about, you know, their favorite fighter's fight coming up, you know, that then suddenly reaches basketball fans and NFL fans and, you know, musicians and hip hop stars. And I don't know, it just seems to me that PBC have that sort of reach, or have those connections in other areas of entertainment more so than other promoters. And if you put that in with this fight in particular, I don't know, it makes sense. It's made sense for me for years, you know, but like if they're going to do that in December, it shocked me when I was first seeing that. But, you know, again, you could have that fight now, whoever, you know, let's say if one of them loses by knockout in 7 rounds, but comes again in a year or two, just do the fight again. You know, how many times did we see Wilder Fury? And each time that fight got more and more awesome. And you would never have thought that after the way the first fight ended with Tyson Fury pretty much coming up like The Undertaker, but winning every round before that pretty much. Crawford Spence I still feel is far likelier. I would be more surprised that if that fight didn't happen rather than it did. But yeah, if we had that in November and then Tank Garcia in December, man, that is 2 amazing back-to-back pay-per-view months.
Have you heard anything, or what do you expect for Spence Crawford? Rematch clause installed for both of them?
I actually haven't heard. I haven't actually heard anything about a rematch clause, but that would not surprise me, because if it's a decision, and the wording that I heard, and this is direct from somebody involved in that fight, like a big boxing fight is what we got when Canelo and Bivol fought on May 7th in Las Vegas. I was there and I was there for the whole fight week. And I was really expecting it to be a transcendent sports event. I was expecting to see, you know, New York Times and, you know, other media that don't normally cover boxing. I was expecting it to be in a huddle with Canelo, like having to reach over and put my dictaphone kind of like, I don't have a dictaphone now, my mobile phone, I have a recorder to kind of like, you know, reach over and kind of fight and for, you know, real estate in a huddle. But it was just filled with people we knew. You know, it was just the boxing. It was a big boxing show. It didn't go to the beyond. It didn't tap into the wider sports mainstream, and in a way that I was expecting it to, like with a Conor McGregor fight or Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao in their heydays. But you know, what did it sell to? It was on pay-per-view over here, wasn't it? I think it was like 700,000, maybe 800,000, or between 600 and 800 anyway. I can't remember the exact figure, which is high for these days in boxing. But considering Canelo's generated more than 1 million in years past, I was expecting kind of more, especially being in Vegas. The reason I mentioned that with Spence Crawford is because the exact wordings I've got from people there involved in that fight is that a big boxing show is the floor. So they're expecting it to break through. You know, they're not expecting the floor. They're expecting it to be, you know, more towards the ceiling, which would be a massive, you know, transcendent sports event featuring 2 of the hottest, you know, American fighters right now. You know, no matter who you are, you're going to have Spence and Crawford in your top 5. It could easily determine the very number 1 in the entire sport. It's such an easy sell. between them, they hold all of the belts. And this was the other thing. I remember speaking to Derek James before Ugas and Spence. And obviously I was speaking about the Crawford fight and how fans and, some media are quite impatient and, one fight's done in a certain way. And his exact words, well, these weren't exact words, but paraphrasing slightly. He said it never made sense fighting Crawford when that fight has to be undisputed. This is what he was saying, because if you had, Crawford with one belt, Spence with like two belts, and it's promoted as this amazing, like what it would be promoted as a significant fight, with what I was just saying about two of the hottest welterweight fighters in the entire sport, two of the best fighters in America, to potentially determine the number one in the entire sport. But then whoever wins, they then have to go and get another belt against somebody in an event that's not going to be as big. It has to be, both of those fighters work to get all of the belts, and then you bring them together, and then that's the order you kind of do it in. Just kind of another reason why I just think everything's kind of been building this year for them to fight in November. And from what I was hearing, they're expecting, I think they would be behind the scenes. I think they would be expecting it to generate at least 1 million in pay-per-view sales.
What do you think on that? Because me as a fan, I don't know if they do enough media and they're very in the middle. I don't think you love Crawford's as a boxer, but as a personality, he doesn't do very much media. He gives very short answers. I know I'm a big fan of the Fight Disciples, and I remember Adam Cattrall stating one time that he was doing an interview with him for BT Sport. And he called him up when he was doing it, and the whole time as he was asking him questions, Crawford was playing the PlayStation and wasn't even looking at him. So Errol Spence is the same. Errol Spence, he'll do media, but he doesn't do a lot of media. He's not funny. You don't hate him. He's not a hero. He's not a villain. And it's kind of like that with both of them. And I do understand, that's major. That's why you see, like we touched on, Mayweather and McGregor, when they did that, they were already huge, but they also did a little mini world tour press conference before that. And most of that was probably made up. It was an act. We all ate it up though, because of what we like to see. And, they got there. McGregor got that kind of playing the cheeky kind of hero, I guess. And then, Floyd just really opened up and decided to play the villain. I'm the rich guy. You're either with me because you like my style, or you hate me because I'm flash and I'm arrogant, but you're still going to watch me because you want to see me get beat. And I don't think that Crawford or Spence do that. But I think the diehards, the guys that love the sport, and even your casual fans that dip in and out will probably buy it. But I think the other people that expect, that are kind of drawn in by a press conference or, a fight, something like that, like a Chisora turning the table upside down, that would be good, if they did that. So I don't know if we've got enough of that to break 1 million. And then also, Fury and Wilder didn't. And how much do we say that if the heavyweight boxing is doing well, the rest of boxing is doing well? And those are two literal giants. And they didn't break. I think it was 750,000, I believe.
I mean, I think it would do more than Canelo Golovkin. You can believe, listeners can believe who they want. Dan Rafael was saying that generated 600K. DAZN was saying it was 1 million, but they said specifically it was worldwide. Dan Rafael's reporting was 600K in the US. And Eddie Hearn seemed to take umbrage of that when they were kind of going back and forth on social media. But, regardless of whether it was 600K or closer to 800K, I still think there was I didn't really see or feel that that fight had that much buzz building up to it. And if it got 800K off of that little buzz, man, that's a home run. But not financially speaking, so I'm not sure if it was 600K, they definitely wouldn't have got back what they paid, for the purses. But using those numbers with Spence Crawford, and I think it just goes back to PBC's contacts and how well Spence is kind of respected by athletes in Texas. How many, I'm sure it might have even been Leonard Ellaby when he was talking about how small the boxing diehards are. you know, how if you were going to have that big of a fight and it was just the diehard, if we were just going to say, you know, forget the casuals, how much do you think the diehards are going to buy into it? I reckon a fight like that would be like 400k for the diehards. You know, if Javante Davis is getting 200k, you know, that I feel like you could double that up for all of the people that are invested in boxing and watch it and read about it and consume content on like a, you know, reasonably regular basis every week. You know, I feel like you would be looking hopefully about 400k for in the US. But then as soon as you're you know, speaking about you know, just that level of transcendence that it could, you know, that Spence could rely on with, you know, with Texas athletes, and then with the connections that PBC has to kind of put it out with wherever it would, you know, need to go in whichever media, and having it on Showtime if there was like 2 episodes or 3 episodes on All Access. These are all things I think that could then elevate it from a 400k show to 5, 6, 7. And just hearing what they said, you know, they were telling me about, you know, a big boxing show is the very floor, and I get the impression they would be disappointed if it didn't break through that floor and hit. You know, that's cool. I was kind of thinking, you know, between 800k and 1 million. I feel like it was, you know, if we can't make that fight work, regardless of, and I completely agree with you, Terence Crawford doesn't do any hardly any media. I'm not sure. I can't even remember if I've spoken to him, but I remember I was interviewing actually Shakur Stevenson, to bring it right back to the very first topic we were talking about. And I think he was at Terence Crawford's house, and Crawford was actually playing pool in the background. There probably is a way to kind of resonate with Terence, but not many people have done it on the media side. Errol Spence, on the other hand, I think you just kind of got to kind of talk his language. He's just like this very chill. I think he was born in New York, yet he owns this, you know, cowboy ranch. He loves horses. You know, he's quite like a peaceful, chill kind of guy with a family and, you know, these big interests, you know, outside of boxing. And then there's other, again, like what I was kind of saying with Garcia and Tank Davis. It's kind of the figures that are, you know, not just the main event fighters, but there's other figures in it, like Derek James. He's super interesting to talk to on a, you know, sort of boxing brain kind of basis. So I'm sure PBC would kind of, you know, have him there in boxing huddles to kind of try and amplify the fight. On Terence Crawford's side, you know, I'm sure they would bring, you know, kind of his. I don't want to say entourage. Entourage kind of has some negative connotations sometimes when you're thinking about, you know, people that have like 20 people, unnecessary people in their camp. I mean more people that are kind of, you know, it's just his friends, family, and trainers. Bomac and Shakur, and I think Keyshawn Davis. I think they're all quite tight, those 3 guys. So as soon as like you've got those kind of people you know, all speaking about, I think they kind of, as well as those connections I mentioned earlier, kind of elevates it from, you know, that 400k diehard audience to something that would be potentially a lot bigger.
When do you think, and what fighters do you think may push it to another $100 pay-per-view event for us in this day and age?
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because like inflation is so runaway. You know, no matter where you are, if you're listening from the UK or the US, I wouldn't be surprised if pay-per-view prices, you know, you would think they would come down, but when everything else has gone up, I don't know. I kind of see it both ways. I would, you know, coming from England reasonably recently, still, I was living there, you know, only a year ago. And your pay-per-view prices are the equivalent of, you know, well, £24.95, sometimes going up to 29. Can't remember if it's 29.95 or 29.99. Either way, let's say it's 30 quid. You know, that's still only $30 the way the pound is at the moment. You know, but back a year ago it would have been maybe $35, at $40 at most. So to go from that kind of pay-per-view culture to, you know, what the reality is in America. Yeah, I'm blown away at how much pay-per-views are in the US. To go from $90 to $100, I don't know. For $100, I still think it's worth it. Crawford and Spence, and then some undercards have been atrocious lately. The Canelo Bivol one wasn't that good, and even Canelo Golovkin wasn't that great either, under-delivered, and it had potential. That one had more potential than Canelo Bivol, but just one good fight, like the co-main and a couple of prospects. That's kind of like, in like interesting fights. That's kind of all I would ask for.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially the price out here. But if you're a double combat sports fight fan like me and you, boxing and MMA, it's a small fortune with pretty much the UFC having a pay-per-view pretty much every month. And then obviously, you've got 10 to 12 maybe scattered throughout the year in the boxing sphere. So it can be kind of expensive.
Oh yeah, it's like $150 a month. And then if you're doing WWE as well and Fight TV, some of these kind of, I don't want to say random, but there's other broadcast companies that you might have subscriptions to, like DAZN as well.
ESPN Plus.
Yeah, ESPN Plus. Each of those is another $10 per month. So yeah, could be looking at least $2,500 a year.
Yeah, quite easily. Moving on, Saturday the 24th of September from the Nottingham Arena in Nottingham in the UK on DAZN for us out here in America. Maxi Hughes, 26-5-2, got the majority decision over Kid Galahad, who dropped to 28-3 with scores of 116-111, 114-114, and 114-113. This was for the IBO lightweight world title. This fight was a stand-in main event for Lee Wood, who was supposed to be fighting Mauricio Lara. That would have been an unbelievable fight. Two guys that, heavy-handed, stand and bang. Hopefully, Lee Wood heals up, bicep injury, so I hear, and they, rearrange that fight, which would be a good fight for the future. But this one, I was intrigued to ask you on this because everyone seemed to see this differently. I thought Maxi Hughes won this, quite convincingly, but then, afterwards I saw some of the, some people were saying on Twitter, and they were saying that, it was quite close. They thought Kid Galahad did, win a few rounds. I thought Maxi Hughes did really well. I thought, he counter punished well. I thought he kept stepping out away from Kid Galahad. He'd come in, work, step out, and Kid Galahad. Do you know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of James DeGale. Well, like he'll get in there, he'll like think that he's won the round, and then he's like, I'm just gonna take the rest of the round off. Then he goes back to his corner, and Dominic Ingles telling him, he's like, oh, you're winning this, don't throw this away. They got into the last few rounds, he was kind of telling him the same thing, and I'm thinking, you're not winning this, Dom. You need to tell him to get out there and to probably win these last 3 or 4 rounds, where it was the complete opposite. It's like if you could score a round on points, it would be like I'm scoring 10 and you've got 9 points. And I'm thinking I'm winning this convincingly, where, I'm not, someone might not have seen that punch or something like that, where it's, it's more of a, 8-9 round or a, 9-9 round. And that tends to be what Kid Galahad does. He never kind of like just grabs hold of a fight and, just tears it away from you. He just kind of like is always just one step ahead. You're in 4th gear. He's in like 5th gear, but he's just kind of coasting. And it's very similar to what I thought the performance against Warrington, where he thought he'd won it, and it was the same thing where he was close, but not grabbing it by the scruff of the neck and just saying, you know what, I'm gonna win this, or I'm gonna take you out. And where does he go from here now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been so high on Kid Galahad for when he was coming up. I thought he just had skill for. I was expecting far more than what actually his career turned out. But I think it's a good win on Maxi Hughes's record. I always feel like with these kind of fights between 2 fighters like that, counter punches as well, the actual quality of the fight not the quality of the fight, the scoring of it can get a bit weird. But yeah. For me, I think it's still a good win for Maxi Hughes, and I'm quite interested in where he kind of goes on and how he can be matched promotionally, and what's available realistically. But how good can you really look against Kid Galahad? because he can, sometimes he can make an opponent look, can embarrass people, and then other times he can, lose, but he makes you look like, can kind of stink out the fight a little bit.
Yeah, he's a very interesting character, isn't he? Because when he was coming up, like you said, everybody used to talk about him so highly, and it's more when, not if, he's going to be, a world title holder. And then it was kind of interesting. I thought that Maxie Hughes, who's really hit a purple patch in his career and kind of turned it around, that he was so confident going into this fight after spending several years on and off sparring Kid Galahad, that he was going to win. Like, he was super confident. And I remember, going into the week of the fight, and I'm thinking, man, he's so confident, when I thought Kid Galahad, even though he was moving up, was maybe the favorite, just in terms of, what we've known about him all this time, having that extra weight and stuff like that going into the fight, not having to, diet and, strip himself so much. I thought it might have been really good for him. And it's also interesting that, obviously Josh Warrington's father, who was, in the fight for Josh Warrington's fight with Kid Galahad, is obviously the coach for Maxie Hughes. So he's already beaten him once. And I'd have said that the actual game plan was similar to what Josh Warrington did. And you can see that, Kid Galahad was kind of befuddled by that, and all of the underhand Ingle tactics, like head clash, low blow, those little nips or whatever he was doing, that little video that Maxie Hughes put on where he, like, under his lat, he had lots of what looked like nip marks or like little bite marks or claw marks or something like that. He was saying he was kind of nipping him, but I don't know, to me, how you could really do that with a boxing glove on. But yeah, it was definitely interesting to see, where Kid Galahad goes from here. Like, does he want to drop down to like British European level and, work his way back up, or, is it just something in camp? Is it something, mental? Because it's like everything's there, but he just can't get it over the line.
Yeah, and yeah, where does Hughes go? I think like Eddie Hearn said after, he can now get I can't remember what the exact quote was, like a big American payday. Who would you see that against? That's next. Not that you could wait on whatever kind of lightweight pictures kind of happening with more pressing concerns for top rank or something.
I'd say it's an interesting one, isn't it, in that division for Maxie, because at the minute at lightweight you've obviously you got like Haney and Kambosos are tied up, and it's because you want him to, for the last year that he's had, to get like the biggest fight. Would you get him in there with another name that's on the slide? Like, would you think like a Linares?
Yeah, that's a good count.
He's still out there. He's well known, I think, to the British fans from coming over there, fighting Corolla. Obviously fighting Luke Campbell, but Luke Campbell, that was in California, but he's still a British opponent. He's well known. He's kind of on the slide. And it would still be a good payday for Maxie. And I think Maxie would probably go in as favorite, even though he's such a smaller name, because the recent losses that Linares has had. But as far as I know, he's not retired. He's still thereabouts, and he's well known to the British fans. I think the British fans would see that as a good opponent, a name, and somebody that they would be happy for him to fight against. And it gives, Maxie a huge fight. You could do that in Vegas, because Linares comes over here, owns a gym in Las Vegas, and that gives, Maxie those, bucket list type of a thing for a British fighter to come and fight in Las Vegas, right? You get your name up in lights and stuff like that. Have it like the Mandalay Bay, good DAZN card. Maybe not the main event, but you could have it as a co-main to a bigger fight, which would attract an American audience. And the belts aren't there at the minute. He's probably got the fifth one, right? The fifth one, the IBO is, I would probably regard as the fifth world title out there. So why go in there against maybe a dangerous opponent? And maybe not as big a payday, whereas Linares is probably a little bit easier at this time in his life. He must be around 40.
Yeah. What about Jojo Diaz, another DAZN stablemate, maybe? Or do you think it's too dangerous before?
That is a good fight. Jojo's out it's November, right? He's fighting William Zepeda.
Yeah, I think it's That's at San Diego. I think it's October 29th. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry, it's at the end of the month. That's a good choice. I think it'll be easy to make, right, between the stables. And then Jojo, he's not a dangerous opponent in terms of like injury, is he? Because he's more of a combination puncher that doesn't have a high, knockout ratio. Why not? The Zepeda fight. If he gets through the Zepeda fight and then he goes in there against Maxi, that would be. I would probably still have Jojo as favorite in that, but it's that's a hell of a trip and a ride for Maxi Hughes from being in there, with like people for the southern area, losing that, then going on and getting fights in like the British level, and then really just turning his life, around. He was what, a painter or a plasterer, as well as being a professional fighter, picking up some smaller titles. So he seems like such a lovely guy, and it's great to see. He's probably up there with what the biggest improvement in British boxing we've seen since Conor Benn or someone like that.
Conor Benn, yeah, took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, when he turned pro, when he was struggling with that French guy, when who was the guy that he fought for Conor Benn, and he should have lost, but they gave him a draw, and then he turned it back around and then beat him in the rematch. I always forget his name. He's like a kickboxer, wasn't he? But begins with P. Now, something like that. But yeah, I think unbelievable performance from Maxi Hughes. And that's one way to stick to a game plan, I think, which shows if you listen and just do as you're told and you have a good game plan, it just shows, what you can do. And same as Teofimo Lopez, when he kept stepping out, kept putting his foot across Lomachenko and not letting Lomachenko get those angles, which I thought was, I think the first time we'd seen somebody that had that idea. And, look what it did for Teofimo Lopez, changed his life around, from to take all of the belts and be maybe not the undisputed champion.
It was Cedric Paynard, by the way.
It was that. Yeah. Also, I couldn't believe I remembered that. I knew it was something like that. Also on that card, Terry Harper moved to 13-1-1, unanimous decision 10 over Hannah Rankin, who drops to 12-6. This was for the IBO again and WBA super welterweight titles. Chief support for that fight. I thought it was a good performance. I thought Terry Harper looked amazing on the scales, but I never really thought, Hannah Rankin she was more of a journeyman. It kind of just shows that unfortunately the lack in depth at the minute in women's boxing probably goes back to, when we saw the UFC first came, with the women's division. Obviously you cover both. And I think at the minute, we do get the odd good fight now and again. And obviously the standout fight for this year so far was obviously Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor. Next month, we do have two amazing fights. Alicia Bumgarner in there with Michaela Mayer, and then obviously Clarissa Shields, Savannah Marshall. But
yeah,
at times I do feel that they do push some of these smaller fights on us a little bit too much. And if you're a casual fan and you're tuning in for the first time and you're like, oh, you know what? I love UFC women's fights. They're amazing. So the women's MMA. And then you turn it on and you're thinking you're going to get the same type of ability and the same type of, back and forth fight in women's boxing. You don't get it. And it would probably kind of like turn you off, especially when you've got those two fights we spoke about are coming up in October the 15th. And that's an entire women's card. And I remember when me and Danny were talking about it, I said, the problem with that is if you tune in to watch that from, the first fight, like I do as a boxing geek, they're probably all going to go the distance, and that's really going to put you off. Because the reason you tune in is, like, especially when you watch like Deontay Wilder, is you can't turn away from the TV because you might miss a knockout. Whereas with these, you can be like, I'm just going to nip out, do something, come back, and this is probably going to go 12 rounds anyway, and I can, catch the decision in the 12th round or the 10th round sometimes in women's fights. So yeah, I do think at times they push it on us a little bit too much just because it's not there. They should really keep some of maybe the other fights lower down on the card and just have the ones that are really going to grab our attention. And like I said, if it's your first view of women's fights, you're like, okay, that was really good. And just put the cream of the crop higher up the card, because sometimes it's like a sentimental value. They'll have them quite high and it's not really deserving yet.
Is it also like the lower down the card they are, maybe there's going to be less pay opportunity, but then when you've got it as a co-main and it doesn't quite bang, it really does suck the energy and flow out of the pacing of the card. But with that October 15th, I keep forgetting this, an all-women card. But even if it wasn't, and it was just those two fights you mentioned with Baumgartner and sorry, who's Baumgartner onwards?
Maya.
Maya, that's it. Yeah, and then Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall. Even if that was just your main and your co-main, and then you had some male prospects below, that's a really good way, I think, of doing some of the women's fights. I don't think necessarily it needs to be an all-female card, although that's definitely a good hook as well. And if I was still living in England, I would 100% be going to that event. It's a great venue, the O2 Arena, and it's not just one big main event. There's two, each of those top two fights could be the headliner. I was a little bit annoyed and frustrated that it got postponed because one, I'm not a royalist, so like I wasn't one of these people that was celebrating the Queen's death, but she is a 96-year-old woman, and to me it's not shocking that she died, and it just got to a point where I mean granted I'm in the US, so my temperature check on this is probably not entirely accurate, but it just felt like a lot of it is kind of quite forced. Like you kind of like feel like some of the media are kind of feeling that they have to have a somber tone and keep it up for 10 days. And then that then leads into various companies feeling like they should be cancelling whatever commitments they have. So I'm a bit, I felt like, if that fight went on, would, 1,000 out of the 20,000 people that would have been going to the O2 Arena not have turned up because they would have been so upset with the Queen's death? Not really sure. I think it still would have been, everyone still would have gone. And if anything, it's more of a frustration for the athletes, all these women that were kind of there to, make way, and, they'd done their camp and they'd gotten to the point where they were, winding down. And then all of a sudden it's like quite up in the air almost at the last minute. I don't really feel like that needed to happen. It could have still gone ahead and we would have had a bit of resolution with a few other promising women that could have been matched, probably not this year, but in interesting storylines going forward. But as it stands, we've got this card that's still intact and is going on ahead in, what is it, 2 weekends or 3 weekends?
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like boxer, like in the pandemic, I think Eddie Hearn was doing a really, really good job with women's boxing. Actually, I think that's one of Matchroom's USPs, and it has been for a while, up there with, producing stadium fights around the world. But boxer for this show, feel like, they deserve the, some really big credit putting this card together. I'm definitely invested in it, even being in America, where some of the cards that are going on in England are not as committed to as I was when I was there, and like going to shows and focusing more sort of on the American side of things. But from an American side of things, this is it's a big event. Credit to Ben Shalom.
And the original event, like you said, was cancelled due to the Queen, but that weekend there was no boxing. So I kind of feel for them, because on October the 15th we have, I believe, Kambosos Haney, we have Deontay Wilder and Robert Helenius, and then over here in the US we have it's in the middle of like college football season, and for our UK listeners, which account for about 50%, that's like religion over here. That's probably the equivalent of what like soccer's like in the UK. Like the amount of people that watch those college and high school events is amazing. The numbers that they pull on like ESPN, or you don't even get some of the attendances at professional games that you get at high school and college games over here. You're looking at like 80,000, 90,000, some of these high school and college stadiums that are filled. So I do feel for them, because, they're probably going to do a lot less tickets, due to that, because people are now going to say, well, I'm not going to go to that because I can just, watch those other fights on TV or something like that. There's probably going to be a UFC event that weekend. I haven't checked, but there is pretty much every single weekend. So I do feel for them. It's not going to get the exposure like it would have done the first time around, which was probably carefully selected to be on a weekend where there wasn't much for us to pick from. Where we would, okay, I want my boxing fix, so I'm gonna watch, I'm gonna watch the women. Whereas this time around, you probably not, especially for over here because it's going to be an afternoon kickoff. An afternoon, the start for the fights are going to be in the middle of the afternoon for us in the US, and 3 of the 4 people in the main and co-main are from the US. Clarissa Shields, Michaela Mayer, and Ulysses Bumgardner, and that's when the college football games are on. And then if you're a boxing nerd, you're probably going to say, well, I'm going to watch the fights tonight. I'm going to watch Deontay Wilder, Robert Helenius instead, because Wilder's can't miss TV, right? The amount of knockouts he's had. So yeah, I feel for the women in that kind of aspect. I don't know.
I think that's great point. I think it was all bubbling up quite nicely as well. Like Clarissa Shields, I thought was on the verge of making Savannah Marshall cry. In the sort of promotional things that they were doing right up to the build-up, and Shields just seemed like she knew exactly what to say to get under her skin. Like, you let your country down, you can't be happy with that. But the way she was delivering it, it certainly had an impact on Savannah. And it kind of reminded me of where, when George Groves and Carl Froch went at it the first time round, Froch just really seemed to just know what to say to get under Froch's skin. And it looked like, even just watching it, looked like Froch was on the verge of, almost tears in his eyes. George Groves, I think, even said, "You're crying, you're going to cry." And it was just like, Jesus Christ, this is mental TV. But yeah, no, I had the same vibe watching Shields and kind of Savannah Marshall have their sit down. Just added even more intrigue to what we thought of, a show that we thought was going to happen at that weekend. And now they kind of like have to, go back and try and capture that lost momentum. And like you say, it would be more difficult potentially to do this time around when there's so much other competition. Not just in boxing, but in wider sports as well.
Some classic moments in the it's called The Gloves Are Off, right? The Sky Sports show. I always remember those ones, the Froch Groves one, like you touched on, and then Chisora telling Dillian White that he was going to go through him like a laxative. Do you remember that?
I just loved Dillian White's reaction. That was a weird analogy.
Some classic stuff on there.
The one that there was one that I really wanted to see, and I think Sky Sports potentially buried it. But when Jarrell Miller and Anthony Joshua were doing theirs, apparently Miller just rinsed him with a freestyle rap. And I think the rumor was it left Joshua looking stupid and speechless. And but yeah, that never saw the light of day. I would love to see that because no disrespect to Anthony Joshua, maybe a little bit disrespect, but I've seen quite a few of these videos he puts out where he's rapping, and if I could rap like that, I still wouldn't. He can't, like that. It's not good. It's not like I listen to like both UK rap and US rap, and that's so far removed from he shouldn't do it. I can totally get why Jarrell Miller probably would be really good at it. Being from New York, the amount of New York rappers that can freestyle and say all kinds of mean-spirited shit for a laugh in the middle of a bar or whatever. So I don't know. I've probably had to up too much in my head if they ever were to release that. I can't imagine they would. I was kind of clinging on to thinking maybe they will fight again because even when Jarrell Miller popped dirty for steroids the first time round, where it was like a cocktail of performance-enhancing drugs, he still ended up going to Top Rank, didn't he? I think that was the timeline. Like once he served his, inverted commas ban, he wasn't really ever banned. But then he did it again, I think. And then Top Rank were like, oh God, can't even deal with this. But I still think, man, I remember even after he popped for the 3 separate tests, they all came back, bang, 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 positive. I remember speaking to Eddie Hearn in Monaco, when that's one of Matchroom's sort of flagship shows that they put on, for the Prince, and quite high rollers in the Monte Carlo casino. I remember asking him about, would he still work with him? And he was just like, still got a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth from what happened. And I said, mate, it would be a big fight. And he was like, and he agreed, it'd be a massive. And, if you put, Joshua's still not gone back to the US, after going to fight Ruiz as a late replacement, and he just got embarrassed. That was such, I was even writing stories, not in the build up to that fight, but from what Sky Sports, like Adam Smith, head of boxing, what Frank Smith at Matchroom, what Eddie Hearn was saying, the messaging that we're always getting in the media was, we're going to turn this guy into like the Roger Federer of boxing. This is like going to be the face. This is going to be a new Floyd Mayweather. He's going to earn even Anthony Joshua himself said he was going to earn $1 billion. And then that was his great American come out party, and he gets knocked down 4 times in like just this humiliating display of dominance, really, from Andy Ruiz. Looked amazing. Yeah, coming up from Ruiz's point of view, coming up off the floor and doing that to a guy who's just chiseled and looks like he's come from like a bodybuilding show. And Andy Ruiz doesn't look like that at all, but he's just got these ridiculously fast hands. The reason why I'm kind of saying that is just because I still think there's like no matter what happens in Anthony Joshua's career, there's still an opening to go back to New York and exercise those demons. And I still think, for an American audience, that's still probably quite intriguing to see, particularly when it's against a controversial American and a home guy like Jarrell Miller. I still think that could probably sell quite well at Madison Square Garden.
Easily. If I was Eddie Hearn, I'd be, get him to come back, have a couple of fights, and then get Jarrell Miller there in the mix, call him out in the crowd, like WWE style, and then literally just be like, get them in the ring, and then have Anthony Joshua like, you fucked up. You could have got paid $6-7 million. You're now taking this fight for peanuts. You were scared. You had to cheat to fight me. Like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it for all you guys. All the, I'm the hero. And then Jarrell Miller just literally just grabbing and playing that villain role. 100%. It was because Jarrell Miller, very good at media, very good talker.
He's a big dude. I was at the, I can't remember where I was. It was a really nice venue in West London when they were initially promoting that fight when they, before it got cancelled. And yeah, he is a big lump of a man. Like Joshua's a big guy, but Jarrell Miller's like thick, as well. He's like a, broad-shouldered, like, strong looking guy.
Like Dean White.
Yeah, great shout. Yeah.
Big massive lump like those.
Yeah,
he was at those Top Rank shows that you just touched on. I was there for the who was the main event? It was Valdez when he fought Adam Lopez, when Adam Lopez had to step in at the last minute, and on the undercard was Carl Frampton and Tyler McCleary. Around that time was when Top Rank, had signed him, because he kept sitting like in the Top Rank seats, kind of like near Bob Arum and stuff like that. And I saw him walking around a few times. That fight was at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas, and he was there then, and then that was when he popped again, and Top Rank were like, okay, let's see you later. But he's come back. I think he's had at least 2 fights that I can remember on smaller cards, getting the wins. But sooner or later, like, he'll probably think like, okay, like, now's the time. That's so far in the distance that I can, jump back in, start doing press, start calling people out. And he'll come in as a villain on some type of card, whether it's PBC, Frank Warren, Joshua. But if I was Eddie Hearn, I'd be like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to do it and just get him in there as the villain. Let him go to town with that. He's good on the mic. So I think he'd sell it, and it would be we'd buy it. As fans,
I would. I think it would be hilarious.
Yeah, I think we would. And the press conferences would be great, and especially if they do like a DAZN feature, like the gloves are off. We'd be all over that. We'd be all over that as fans.
The only way that footage of this apparent freestyle where Jarrell just kind of embarrasses Joshua is I'm sure Sky Sports own that, and it would be a DAZN. I'm presuming it would be a DAZN show, so it still wouldn't see the light of day, but potentially Jarrell Miller could just go and do it again anyway.
Exactly.
A more updated version.
Yeah, right. So since we're talking about heavyweights, let's jump into it. Manchester Arena in Manchester on BT Sports in the UK. Joe Joyce moved to 15-0 against Joseph Parker, who dropped to 30-3 with an 11th round knockout. This was for the WBO interim heavyweight world title. What is your assessment, Al, so far of what we've seen from Joseph Parker? Because I do at times think he's massively overrated, because if we look at the fights that he's had, so he got, the WBA strap against Andy Ruiz in a fight that was, super close. Could have gone to Andy Ruiz if maybe he was the home fighter, because it was over there in New Zealand. Then, he steps up, fights AJ. They didn't really, I don't know who you blame. Do you blame AJ for not, kind of coming forward and trying to blow him out of there? Or was it the fact that Joseph Parker didn't really throw and he was kind of negative in that fight? lost to Dillian White, even though he went super close to him. A couple of fights with, you know, Chisora. Ideally could have gone both ways as well. You know, I can't really think of a performance that we've seen from Joseph Parker since he hit the heavyweight scene. Well, I've gone, wow. Like, wow, that was a great performance. Because in all the ones we talk about, they're either 50-50 or he kind of just scrapes a win. And in like this one, we're talking about a good performance, but he got knocked out. So like, there's none of these performances, you know, he's really, really convinced, you know, and blown someone out there. And I think it's just maybe us as being soft, sentimental Brits that we kind of like him because he's funny and he did those COVID videos and stuff like that.
Yeah, he was like
and you know, and then like us as media, because he's another guy that will sit there. He's super friendly. He'll talk. He'll laugh and he'll do every single media that's there on a media day. So I do think at times he's kind of fooled us.
I'm not disagreeing. Like when you mentioned those pandemic era videos, yeah, he was one of the early stars, I think, providing a bit of, especially like when it was still quite fear-based with what was being reported, and he was bringing quite light-hearted nonsense to the timeline, but that was, you know, produced to a high quality, you know, way. There must have been a bit of money spent there, and like having direction and rehearsals and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. And one thing I would add is that, you know, sometimes you have, you know, like a champion would fight someone that you know, is there on the scene, and then but that win looks better with age. But with Parker, with you know, it's always been referenced as one of, you know, whenever Eddie Hearn is saying, you know, people are disrespecting Anthony Joshua's record, and I think that's a valid thing for Eddie Hearn to say that, you know, when he relies on, you know, who he's actually fought. But I feel like now we should probably take Joseph Parker's name off of, you know, the list of, you know, Joshua's really meaningful wins in the division. You know, you could start with Dillian White, because at the time that was a coming together of two, you know, that was potential, not crossroads, but, you know, whoever won that, you know, could have gone on to, you know, do what Joshua ended up doing. And I think then, you know, Charles Martin, I wouldn't include him anymore at all. You know, Joseph Parker, wouldn't include him. You know, the next person who really was of a good standard would have been Vladimir Klitschko. But again, that performance, not the performance, sorry, but that the way, you know, it still has an asterisk because it wasn't as good as Tyson Fury's win. But yes, I don't think the winner, just to come back on point, I don't think Anthony Joshua's win on Joseph Parker, you know, it's aged badly, just because of, you know, the sort of performances, the matches, and the losses that he's had. But losing to Joe Joyce, I don't know. Look, I remember like still being, it's so hard sometimes seeing someone when they're fighting at a certain level and coming up and thinking, you know, how good or how bad, you know, is this person going to be, relatively speaking, when it comes to the world scene. And it really only took, I was quite, you know, quite slow, I think, to the Joe Joyce hype train. And was it even a hype train? I don't even know. But it was the Dubois fight that really sold me. I was just like, oh, you know, I've spent a lot of time in the Peacock gym, so I remember hearing what people were, you know, and obviously I was around Daniel Dubois myself, but you know, the messaging that was coming out of that gym was that, you know, there was one coach there that was just saying that, you know, Dubois will be what people were hoping Anthony Joshua would be, just this, like, you know, really high quality heavyweight who could, you know, potentially do it all and also be a champion. And then he just ran into Joe Joyce and had his eye really, you know, messed up. And I don't take anything from him. Taking a knee is fine. You know, it should be recorded probably maybe as a submission, you know, rather than a knockout, because it's
tap out.
Yeah, just different type of loss. But yeah, if just to make a random reference, but Sebastian Fundora took a knee in the Erickson Lubin fight, but he came out of that fight with so much credit. Taking a knee can be, you know, a decent strategy, and Fundora needed to do that. Then he went on to completely bloody and bruise Erickson Lubin in what for me is still the fight of the year. But yeah, so going back, taking the knees, not, you know, I don't discredit Daniel Dubois at all for that. And then one of the people that ended up doing that was Billy Joe Saunders, and then of course he ends up doing similar himself. against Canelo. But yeah, what Joe Joyce did to Daniel Dubois, man, Dubois had so much. I wouldn't say hype. It was respect, right? He was considered. I think he was even on the ESPN list as like one of the top 25 fighters under the age of 25, at least 2 years running. And that's on the American side. So on both the UK and the US side, we had this heavyweight who was really, really highly thought of, and then Joe Joyce goes and does that to him. That was what really was like, Jesus, this is going to be the guy that's, going to go potentially all the way, but he's going to do it at his own pace, which is, quite unconventional. With it's almost like a reincarnation of a George Foreman type person. So now Joe Joyce is he's building up a really interesting resume, like going even as far back as Ustinov, I think, in his like 8th fight early on. And now he's got the 11th round stoppage win over Joseph Parker. And then when you look at their faces at the end of the fight, there's not much damage on Joe Joyce, and Joseph Parker hit him quite hard, quite a few times, I think, in the 3rd round. And then you look at Joseph Parker, he ended up wearing sunglasses because it looked so bad. Really interesting fighter and person, Joe Joyce. I find him quite like a wholesome, cuddly bear. I remember when Daniel Dubois, and again, this is really out of character actually for Daniel Dubois, but he made a really weird reference to Joe Joyce's mum about her being, it was like a very disrespectful thing he said to her about being blind. It was like, your mum will be glad that she can't even see you get beat. Very, very strange like tactic to take in a public press conference. But Joyce didn't even react. He just went, "That's not very nice," and then kind of moved on. It's just like that's very typical of the way Joe Joyce kind of is. Like he's very scandal-free athlete, very like contrary to kind of what we would expect from maybe British heavyweights. Looking at Tyson Fury, some of the stuff that he's said and done over the years, I can't imagine Joe Joyce ever doing anything like that. He's kind of like, I feel like Anthony Joshua tried to do that, and over the years we've kind of seen that it's not really his personality. It's just like a very media trained soccer NFL player who needs to behave and speak a certain way, or be at risk of losing, his sponsorship deals with Lynx, which is Axe over here in the US, and can't remember who else he's got. It's all companies similar to like Gatorade, and
Jaguar, Land Rover.
Whereas Joe Joyce, he is that scandal-free, like just lad next door. But again, he's just a big lump of a man.
So it'd be right in saying that, in the UK at the time, when they were both in the amateur scene, that probably most media and most coaches, had their money on Dubois being the guy that would come and take over the professional scene.
Yeah, in a way, this is another like good part of the narrative of Joe Joyce. Is he's really done it the hard way, but he's done it his own way. He hasn't felt the need to be anyone other than himself, and he's very slowly won people over. But I mean, I'm really sold on it. I can't wait to see him in with someone like Usyk. I can't wait to see whether Deontay Wilder can touch that. He can touch that chin, but whether it is when that touch happens, if Joyce is going to fall. I can't wait to see him win with, everyone. Fury, that's an easy fight to make, very in-house with Queensberry Promotions. Joshua, I think he probably beats him. I think he gives a nightmare for everyone.
On this performance, Al, do you think it was an improvement by Joe Joyce? Do you think that you can slowly see things come together? Because, when he did turn professional, he did go through, several coaches and seems to have kind of, finally settled on Ishmael Salas. And then also, were you surprised by how big Joseph Parker came in?
With the first one, like I feel like Joyce, every time I see him, I'm kind of surprised. Like, even though I think he'll probably be a handful for any of those, athletes I just mentioned, like the very top. No matter what he does, I think I'll still be surprised. I think he's just got that in him where it's hard to know. You think he's slow, and you think you could box around him, but then he'll just wear you down or something. You think he doesn't hit hard, but he does. The damage he does, it's like a very slow thudding. I don't know. He's a walking contradiction. You think he's slow, but he's not, and you think he's not powerful, but he is.
It's like you say. I think the analogy of George Foreman. George Foreman didn't have that Deontay Wilder kind of like pop where it was like thud, 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 but it still puts you out. Yeah, it's not like a quick lights out. It's more of you know, a real beating which you get from Joe Joyce. And yeah, he's definitely is one of those characters that you're watching from the outside, like on the TV, or maybe from the outside in Spire, and you're like, this guy hasn't got the best technique, but it works and it all comes together. And there's, you know, plenty of people who've been in there with him. They say that like, yeah, he doesn't seem quick, but his timing must be perfect. You know, the way that he does it, and then the output. You know, look at, was it like 800 and something punches when?
Oh yeah, obscene. Yeah, the CompuBox numbers were like, it was. I think there was 96 body shots landed. You know, 1 in 8 of his shots were a body shot that landed. It's crazy. I mean, I don't know if this is a hot take, but for me, he's the 3rd best heavyweight in the world. Usyk, you know, depends who you have, Usyk or Fury number 1, but he's number 3. You know, people over here in America might, you know, be offended by that with Deontay Wilder, but Deontay Wilder's lost 2 back to back. Depends how he comes back. You know, does a win against Helenius do that much? I'm not sure. I think people around him are really hoping for like to recapture, you know, what he was doing, just knocking people out in a really violent way that just adds to his highlight reel. But judging by the results that have just happened, you know, I can't keep someone still in the top 3 when they've been on a bit of a losing run. And the same with Anthony Joshua. Both of those guys, I feel, you know, when you've got someone coming up, you know, they deserve to leapfrog them. And Joe Joyce for me is that guy. That's my top 5, and I feel like Joyce is the number 3. I can't wait to see him in a bigger test.
No, yeah, it'd be interesting because of I think we're all just you know wondering, you know, can that head take a shot from Deontay Wilder, because we know that, you know, the output from Joyce, the cardio that he has, you know, he finishes the fights and then he's interviewed and doesn't even look out of breath. He's for somebody that size to be able to do what he do is he's obviously, you know, just genetic freak, or you know, he's just works, you know, super hard, because he comes in like he's big and he's heavy, but he always looks like he's in, you know, good shape and stuff like that. And you can tell from his performances, even though he is very kind of awkward and the technique doesn't seem to be there, he always looks like he's kind of throwing the punches with his shoulders instead of, you know, like, you know, the turn in the hips and stuff like that. But yeah, it definitely works. It's
he turns that we used to, British fighters, I think, used to have a bit of a reputation in America, or maybe it was just the forums that I kind of was dragged into like it was well over 10 years ago, like 15, 20 years ago. But I kept on hearing British glass, you know, as an insult about chinny, you know, apparently chinny British fighters, but he kind of bucks that idea on its head as well. It's like, you know, he doesn't even, I don't know, wobble. You know?
Yeah, he just comes forward. Literally, he's kind of like Homer Simpson. You know, where he just kind of like wears people down because they, you know, they hitting him and hit him and hit him, and he doesn't go out, and then they're exhausted, and he's like, okay, you know, time to turn it on. And yeah, let's just hope, you know, because of the age that he is as well, that, you know, we get to see those big fights. But like you said, a lot of fighters, you know, like Tyson Fury is with Frank Warren, and that should be you know, a fight to make. And then obviously later down the line, at some point, you've got the Dubois rematch. You know, I'm sure there's probably like a section of fans that are like, okay, you know, Dubois gone away, change your coach and stuff like that, and they'll be backing him because they want to be right the first time around. You know, so they'll want to see that rematch, and that'll be another, you know, Dubois super young, so you know you probably try and catch Joyce when they're hoping that he's over the hill, but still has that name. And yeah, British boxing, especially in the heavyweight scene, is on fire right now.
Oh yeah, I think it's kind of a contrast to the rest of British boxing, but yeah, the heavyweights. I was just with what you're saying about Joyce's age. I was going to say, like, it's to the credit of, you know, how he's being moved. Really, that it's he's being moved perfectly, considering how quickly they've needed to do things, and it's probably going to be, you know, a similar sort of way of matchmaking and what's the right word? Urgency, and to get you know, the right fights at the right time more quickly than what it would be with someone younger. But I think Fraser Clark is probably going to have to go through a similar process. You know, decorated amateur, someone who's got, people have got a lot of high hopes for. But again, I think that he'll probably take the Joe Joyce route, or whoever, you know, that his handlers will need to take the Joe Joyce route with him. But again, that's another guy, like you say, who is, you know, just flying the flag for British boxing. You've got, Fraser Clark, Joe Joyce, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Dillian White, and then want to say, David Adeli is coming up, and also Johnny Fisher. I think I've forgotten who Fisher's with now.
He was with Matchroom, right?
Yeah, it's Matchroom Boy. Yeah, that's it. But yeah, that's seven heavyweights. That are all. Oh, and Dubois, that's 8. So all kind of like, you've got at least 4 that are in the top 15 worldwide, with Fury, Joshua, White, and Joyce. And then coming up, you've got Adeli, Clark, Fisher, and Dubois, who are going to be there or thereabouts, in the next potentially 2 years.
Dave Allen,
big time.
Since we're touching on, British fighters, something I wanted to touch on whilst you're on the show, because for people listening, there's nothing to review for next week, nothing to review for this weekend. So we've got a rare weekend off. If you're a combat sports fan, you're probably going to be watching either the UFC or the Bellator event. So only 5 years ago, Al, 2017, we had 13 British world champions. In those 5 years, what do you think has changed with the boxing really taking off in the UK? What do you think has changed, the fact that we don't have nowhere near as many fighters like that? And do you think we're losing a lot of the people to mixed martial arts?
That's actually a really good point, that last one. I hadn't even thought about because UK MMA is actually on fire. We've got our second, so we've only ever had, before, like a few months ago, we only ever had one UFC champion, Michael Bisping, amazing ambassador for UK MMA and MMA in general. It's hilarious. Based near where you are, California. Still works for the UFC in retirement, on commentary. But yeah, good dude. I remember one event, he turned up post-fight press conference after winning, and he was there with a bottle of beer. And you couldn't get more like UK lads abroad than that. Such a funny image for a British athlete, in another country and excelling, in that foreign country. But now we've got our second UFC champion, Leon Edwards. Really deserved for me. I was, it's hard to kind of be impartial sometimes, but the fact that Leon he'd already fought Kamaru Usman once and lost, and then he just went on an amazing run that was, I think, at least 8-9 fights undefeated, and it was becoming a bit like Tony Ferguson at lightweight, who just went through so many fights and won, and that he never got that title shot. And I was just hoping that didn't happen to Leon Edwards, because if you're really putting together that many wins at the very top of your division, you really deserve the title shot. But yeah, he got the title shot and he won in Utah. So he goes back to Birmingham with the UFC championship. But then, but he's kind of spearheading this new wave with, Paddy Pimblett, Jack Shaw, Tom Aspinall, Molly McCann. And there's quite a few others that, those are just off the top of my head. But Tom Aspinall, I think, has got a real good shot at heavyweight, just because heavyweight MMA is very weird. It's not like heavyweight boxing, and you can go a long way with power, and Tom Aspinall has power, but he's also got very underrated jiu-jitsu. Jack Shaw is probably the most talented of the bunch out of all of the UK MMA guys and girls, but he's just in a very, very tough division. He's in one of the lighter weight classes, and it's very talent rich where he is. So that does seem a valid point, whether we're losing people who are very competent in fighting, potentially. I also think that Matchroom, their USPs for me in the last few years, stadium fights and women's boxing. And I get why, when they were, when Eddie Hearn kind of made them come again, and they had Carl Froch and got Kell Brook, and, things were flying high. For, the only thing they didn't have was the heavyweight. They signed David Hay, and then they ended up getting Anthony Joshua after he won gold. So it did kind of make sense why you would suddenly have this push to become not just seen as the UK, the UK promoter. You just promote UK shows. That was kind of becoming Matchroom's thing on their perception from the outside world. I always remember Eddie Hearn telling me there's only 2 keys to promotion for Eddie Hearn, going back 10 years ago when he probably first told me this: perception and hype. Eddie Hearn can hype a fight. He can really taps into the that soccer fandom, and that's why you end up setting up soccer stadiums, because that's not just the hardcore going there. You've also tapped into England fans. But by coming outside of England and putting on shows in Italy and Spain and Australia and The US as well. They're doing some good, good shows in the US. I've actually got, I was making notes on this. So they've got Teraji and Kayaguchi at the Saitama Arena in Japan. That's cool. That's a really cool, hardcore boxing, fan. If you're listening to this show, you definitely want to watch that. Bivol and Ramirez in Abu Dhabi. I've got thoughts on Abu Dhabi. Dubai raised red flags for me. If anyone was going to Dubai, I was thinking, why? Because Daniel Kinahan is there, and why do you want? It just seems suspect when Daniel Kinahan's got such a presence there. If you're going to Dubai, and then all of a sudden people are being pictured with Kinahan, Abu Dhabi is completely different. There's one. I feel like Abu Dhabi and Dubai have got a bit of a rivalry. If Abu Dhabi was building the Etihad Arena, which was the T-Mobile Arena and the not the Forum, what's the big the Staples Crypto.com, that was their big 20,000 seater stadium. And it was kind of like a rivalry with what Dubai were building with the Coca-Cola Arena. It was like to Arsenal Tottenham when they want to build them for the bigger stadium. So Abu Dhabi's different. And they're definitely the combat sports culture there is more embedded for me than what it has ever been in Dubai and also in Saudi Arabia. I don't feel the combat sports culture is it's weird in Saudi Arabia. I remember I didn't go to the Joshua Ruiz rematch, but I've heard from reporters that were covering it. It was very stale. Like the fight week was very like artificial. It's like just in the middle of nowhere, and the arena was built purposely for that, and it just didn't have that big event feel because it was so weird and random. But the combat sports culture in Abu Dhabi is different. UFC have been there for years and years. They did Fight Island there. Jiu-Jitsu is taught in schools. It's just like how, baseball, I suppose, is. It's very like, there's so many different types of martial arts going on. And now Matchroom have got that deal with Abu Dhabi. I actually think that's a really positive thing that they are doing together. And I think that could be really big. And you've got Bivol and Ramirez fighting there. Estrada and Gonzalez, that's not got a location yet, unless that's happened today or yesterday and I've missed it. But surely that's not going to be happening in the UK. The only UK shows Matchroom are doing is Ben and Eubank, granted big event. Katie Taylor is in London, but it's at the old Wembley Arena. It's a small arena. It's not like it's not like the O2. And then you've got Warrington Lopez in Leeds. Matchroom aren't really doing that many shows in the UK as they were previously. And the other thing I think Matchroom, so I don't want this just to seem like I'm criticizing. I think it's quite valid criticism. I think they do great with the stadium shows, and they did do great with pandemic era with the women's boxing. But one thing I think they haven't actually done, and this has gone on for years now, they've never really developed a star. Anthony Joshua was a star, but he came in, he was already a star. He'd won the gold medal. He could have gone anywhere and he would have still had the same level of, it would probably be different if he signed with an American promoter, but if he signed with any UK-based promoter, he still would have gone on to sell out stadiums, right? Who is, Conor Benn, I suppose, is the first real star that they're developing. But outside, how many other stars have they developed in, let's say, 12 years since Eddie Hearn took over as, the main boxing figure at Matchroom? And then you compare that to the amount of stars that, like, Frank Warren knows how to do it. Ricky Hatton, Joe Calzaghe, Prince Naseem, Tyson Fury, Top Rank, they really know how to do it. It's not just the star making, it's the matchmaking as well. It's right fights, right time. Whether Matchroom have taken the foot off the ball a little bit, I don't know, like Canelo Bivol, Canelo's your main man, and you put him in with Bivol and he loses, and then you put him in with Triple G, that should have been a knockout for me. To really re-establish Canelo as, one of the supreme fighters in the sport, I really feel like he needed a knockout to kind of recapture the momentum he was having. And then with Joshua, back-to-back losses to Usyk, for me, he was never going to win that rematch. What could he have really improved on to close the gap with Usyk? So I just feel like when they have the stars, well, one, they can't, it seems like they don't build stars as frequently as all the other major promoters, PBC, Top Rank, and even Frank Warren. And then the other thing, when they have a star, it seems like eventually, the train comes off the tracks.
Do you think that's because, people always say that Dana White and the UFC don't want a star to get as big or anywhere near as big as the UFC? The only exception, probably people shouting at the podcast right now, Conor McGregor. you think it's something like that Eddie Hearn doesn't want somebody as big as Matchroom or as big as him, or do you think it's just due to the fact of eventually they need to be put in there with somebody as big, or maybe thirdly they don't want somebody, you know, huge to walk away because, you know, it's going to get to the point where the contract's going to finish and somebody could come in and poach them. So once it gets towards the end of that contract and they kind of get the feeling that, you know, the person may walk, they do, aka a Dana White again, like, and then they throw them in with someone, you know, super hard. So if they do leave, like Nate Diaz, for example, they're walking away with, you know, a loss. Obviously, Nate Diaz was supposed to lose to, you know, Chimaev. So do you think it's, you know, could be one of those three?
I think with the, I think it was the first one where Eddie Hearn's definitely, when sometimes you speak to him in Matchroom, you do hear about, it's not just like the brand of Matchroom in the business, you do sometimes hear them say about the brand of Eddie Hearn. You know, he's got a lot of hell of a lot of followers on social media, and he's good at social media. But also, I don't think it's like he's too overly concerned with having, you know, I think there was, don't want to kind of misquote someone. I'm sure he wanted to promote a Conor McGregor boxing event. You know, and you can't get a bigger, you know, outside of, you know, boxing, who's the biggest ego? Conor McGregor, one of them. You know, for him to be willing to work with him and bring him in, you know, he's worked with Jake Paul. That's kind of a bit sour now that they filed a lawsuit against him. You know, when they were first entering, you know, the US space, you know, on a considerable level, and they had the backing of DAZN's 10 figures, whatever the budget was, $1 billion, you know, $1 billion. They targeted specifically, you know, quite Premier Boxing champion stars, and you know, they were big stars. You know, like Adrian Broner was one at the time. I think they were trying to go after the Charlos. I can't remember if they went after Wilder as aggressively as they might have done with Broner. So the kind of athletes that they're targeting, I don't think Matchroom and Hearn are particularly concerned about somebody having a bigger stardom or going on to be having a bigger stardom than brand Matchroom. But yeah, the one about having a star leave on a high is quite an interesting point, because I feel like it would be so earlier in the summer when Canelo, before he fought Bivol, we're being told that the plan with Canelo was to fight Triple G. That was kind of always not signed, but pretty much there. And then they wanted to do a, you know, final fight of the year in December against someone like John Ryder. And then we're also hearing of Usyk. And it was like, Jesus, you know, he's going to go up to heavy, you know, they're thinking about, and these are all obviously Matchroom fighters. So he went on to lose to Bivol. He's now laboured kind of to a uninspiring win over Golovkin. For me, you know, don't want to be too harsh, but I wasn't like blown away. I really wanted to see well, not that I wanted to see it, but I thought if Canelo wanted to re-establish that momentum, he needed to knock him out. But that didn't happen. But we're still hearing that Usyk might, you know, they want to rematch Bivol. It's not a fight he's going to be able to win at 175. At 168, it's probably even riskier, because if he loses to Bivol at 168, then suddenly his supremacy in his own weight class is, you know, completely compromised. But even if they kind of skirt that and think, okay, we'll do like a John Ryder type fighter or someone else. I don't know who they've got, but you know, as soon as you look at other options, you're looking at non-Matchroom fighters at 168. They're going to want to keep hold of him to kind of keep, you know, doing these pay-per-view shows with DAZN and you know, recapture some of the money that they've spent over the years. But if they do the Usyk one, that's like it's like you say, it's like you're sending Nate Diaz when the UFC were trying to, you know, they booked a fight with Chimaev. That was really harsh matchmaking. That, you know, as big of a cult hero as Nate Diaz is, and as an incredible personality as he is, he just was never going to have any sort of shot against at his age, and with the amount of damage he's taken over the years, he was never going to have a shot against Chimaev, who has taken very little damage apart from the Gilbert Burns fight, which was a fight of the year in MMA. But apart from that, he literally picks people up in the middle of the octagon, carries them the other side, slams them down, and just beats the hell out of them until the end of the fight. He's done that. I've seen him do that. Like, that's his signature move. It's amazing to see that he can just manhandle someone his own weight class and like they're a baby. So like the kind of speculation was that they wanted to send Nate Diaz out, and this is kind of like an emphasis as a broken sort of fighter, so that it wasn't, if he then went to Bellator or did a boxing event with Jake Paul, it doesn't have the same, momentum, kind of saying that word a lot, as it would like he has right now. He went out on a high with a fight that he should have had all along, really, with Tony Ferguson, two guys who, both Californians, both really interesting personalities, both have given a lot to the sport of mixed martial arts. And, it was just the crowd as well. I was there, Octagon side, really, really invested in that fight. Nate Diaz then came into the media tent. He asked if anyone had a beer. Nobody did. It's a media tent. There's coffee and Pepsi, well, Coke, I think it was, and water. So they ended up sparking up a spliff and just sat there smoking weed in front of the entire press room. I think I was on the third row and I smelt it pretty quickly. And I just feel like, yeah, you're right. If that he went out fighting Chimaev, we wouldn't have got that press conference. And he was on form. It was more like a comedy routine. Now he's a free agent, can explore any options, and he goes out on a high. If he fought Chimaev, that never would have happened. And potentially that could end up being what happens to Canelo if he fights Usyk. There's no way. Can Canelo? Canelo's had a bit of a. I think he's 1-1 at 175, right? He knocked out Kovalev. Great performance, but then he really did look out of his depth against Bivol. For me, Bivol's like fainting for one, just completely bamboozled Canelo. The jabbing was something else. Better boxer at that weight. I don't know if the same thing would happen at 168. I presume it would. But if you're struggling with Bivol at 175, I'm not sure how you can have any sort of success with Usyk, who would weigh in at 220, and Canelo would. I'm not sure he'd even do 201, but he'd probably just weigh whatever he feels comfortable at. It's a knockout waiting to happen. And then that's kind of like, I can completely see what you're saying, because David Benavidez, Jamal Charlo, and Errol Spence at 164, that's a hell of a offer. That's really strong 18-month period there that PBC and Showtime can offer, and have offered before, and I believe will offer again. But then, how much interest would those fights have when Canelo's coming in off like a second loss to Bivol and then a knockout loss to Usyk? It suddenly looks like you're taking a broken fighter, like what Nate Diaz could have been. I think that's a really valid point that you made.
And Eddie Hearn's openly said that he admires and he likes the way that the UFC works. So I could see him, if he hadn't already thought about that himself, which I'm sure he has. Eddie Hearn's a very intelligent guy. That okay, with fighters are on the verge of leaving, to knock their stock down, let's get them in there with somebody hard. So on the off chance they do leave, they're not gonna affect matchroom boxing as much as they do. How hard is it to find a boxing gym in the UK? Because in the California, it's super easy to find like some sorts of mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu, something like that. So I'm just wondering, the fact that I would say, the stable of UK fighters isn't as good as, are we seeing, the disappearance of boxing gyms, especially after COVID? We had some very old school, boxing gyms, throughout the US, all closed. So I wondered if it's the same sort of impact in the UK.
There's some like, there's hotbeds, isn't there? Like London's got a few good gyms. There's the one in the East End that's Repton, really strong amateur gym. Shane McGuigan's got one in Kent. Alan Smith, I think, is a really good coach. He's actually coaching a prospect I was really, really high on, Dennis McCann.
Love him.
Yeah, traveller fighter. And I was even speaking to Alan basically about like the traveller fighting style and just how Dennis McCann kind of embodies it as well. So while you've got like Billy Joe Saunders is kind of been and gone, I don't ever expect to see him again on the world level. Tyson Fury is still there, and that just shows how but both of those have got similar styles, right? This is kind of what I'm saying. Like it shows that the traveller boxing style is successful on the world stage, and if anything, it's quite like how the part of the American style is with guys like I don't want to say Floyd, but it's just because he's like a defensive fighter, and Pernell. But they're defensive first, but they can also turn it on when they want to, and that's kind of like how the Traveller style is, or the UK Traveller style is. But Dennis McCann is just another embodiment of that. Joe Calzaghe came out of a very random place in Wales. So it's not just the sort of inner cities like in England, in London, that have these gyms that are sort of like hard to reach kids probably flock to, and then they find like the discipline that sort of boxing can provide. You can also get it in, what we would call the sticks out in the, woods. Like I'm sure I might be talking BS, but I'm sure Joe Calzaghe and Enzo came from like a gym that was like in a very random place in Wales.
Yeah, it was like a rundown shack.
Yeah,
yeah, I've posted it a couple of times on our Twitter account over the years just to show people that if you Google it, it's like a rundown, very small brick building. Looks like it's something like the windows have been put through all cardboard, and it just very, very, very old school, especially for someone like Joe Calzaghe. He was still training there when he was like a multiple world champion. But I suppose not having those luxuries maybe keeps you hungry and stuff like that. And
on the flip side, though, some of the gyms I've been to, like that outside of England, and I'm sure like the ones in Manchester are probably the same as the ones in London, Sheffield, and up on the northeast as well. Like the ones I'm used to in London were very like rusty equipment. I'm kind of emphasizing, but it wasn't modern. And I've been in some of the showers, after a workout, and you when you come out, you feel grubbier than when you went in. Some of the showers are disgusting. Whereas you contrast that with some of the bigger complexes outside, like the Mayweather gym. Granted, it's had more money pumped into it, but it's a big real estate. There's I think there's 2 rings, loads of equipment. Even in Dublin, granted this is again because of the Conor McGregor money, but John Kavanagh's new or latest straight blast gym is massive. It's one of the biggest gym like complexes I've been to. It's got so many members. And then you've got the fight team. I think the MMA fight team's probably like maybe 20 deep, but then you've got, it's just kids classes as well. There's at least one massive octagon there, full size. There's huge jiu-jitsu mats. There's a ring upstairs. Trying to think of the other ones I've been to. And there's a good one here actually, just around the corner from me, called the DLX Gym. It's where Caleb Plant had his workout yesterday. It's quite small, but it's like completely modern. It looks nice. It's got very, very nice. And again, you go into that shower and you'll feel very clean when you come out of the session. I suppose like a contrast to that, maybe the Wildcard Gym's kind of a little bit dated. Not Legends, the West Side one.
West Side Gym.
Yeah, West Side Gym. Yeah, that kind of reminded me of the ones in London. But I think when you come out of England, suddenly you do have these complexes where there's, it feels more professional, I think is the right word, rather than dated and hasn't had the right level of funding put into it.
Do you think in the UK it's easier to find a boxing gym or an MMA gym? I'm just trying to think of, if you're a teenager and you're thinking to yourself, I want to get involved in combat sports in some shape or form, you're going to Google it, and then you'll probably just go to the one that's closest to you. So I'm just wondering if we're going to, if I'm right in thinking that we're losing some of these fighters. For example, like you touched on Tom Aspinall, he probably, he's good with his hands. And if, the MMA wasn't so prevalent, we could have, had him in the heavyweight division in the mix with, Tyson Fury and people like that right now.
I feel like if that's going to become really prevalent, like there's definitely there was a Conor McGregor effect in Dublin, where like John Kavanagh was even saying to me when I was there that you just saw the uptick. Like when I can't remember when the first fight they had that was in Dublin, and they had 4 straight blast gym fighters all on the card, and they all won. Conor McGregor was one of them, and then I think that was really what kicked off a level of like Dublin kids coming into the gyms. I don't feel like we've got that level of I mean McGregor's a unicorn, but we don't have. I mean Paddy Pimblett might be close, but I don't think he's ever going to get a championship. His weight gain is so like that's going to be a disadvantage quite quickly. Like Ricky Hatton had to retire at 28, and I'm sure it's because it's not healthy to get on the Guinness and blow up in so much weight, and then you come into camp when you've got to lose weight, when really you want to come into camp fit, and firing quite quickly, and rather than play catch up and lose that weight after week 3 or 3 weeks behind schedule. So I don't, I don't think we've in England. Leon Edwards is a really cool guy and nice and everything, but he's not got the magnetic personality that people would flock to when it comes to that would resonate, from a mainstream thing when suddenly kids are getting into it. And I don't think, MMA was far less popular when Michael Bisping was kind of doing his thing. But if he came around now, maybe he would be the guy. But I still think just anecdotally, when I was still there, I feel like London definitely had more prominent like boxing gyms, like between Repton, Peacock. There was a trad one, I think it was called TKO. Mark Tibbs and Jimmy Tibbs were there quite a lot. 2 really good East End coach, father and son. As I'm trying to think, the main MMA gym in London is called Shoot Fighters, but there's 2 of them. One's a little bit bigger than the other, but again, they're not like quite small. And then Leon's got his place in Birmingham. There's a few in Nottingham. Nottingham might have a decent like sized as big MMA side as the boxing.
Dan Hardy.
Yeah, that's the one. And like Carl Froch, and then is it Lee Wood, who's also is he Nottingham boy? Yeah. So yeah, I mean the tide might be turning, but I feel like MMA is kind of, apart from in the UK, I feel like MMA is kind of struggled to keep its momentum going from how prevalent and prominent it was when it really came. When Dana White brought the sport back in like 1 month after everyone went into COVID terror.
Mm-hmm.
He was just like, no, fuck this. Let's keep the ball rolling. And boxing was quite slow to come back. And when you look back, I wasn't really that impressed with Fight Camp. It felt a bit. It didn't fit. There was money pumped into it, and I've been to one Matchroom event. That was at the HQ. And that the food that they put out is good. So I imagine the food would have been good at Fight Camp. I think it would have been more like a festival vibe rather than a like a York Hall event, where you just go and get pissed and whatever else. I feel like there probably would have been a bit more going on with music and pyrotechnics and stuff. But the actual quality of the shows, when it came to the boxing, I don't think was, left a little bit to be desired. Like one of the things I can remember was just Dillian White getting absolutely pummeled with that uppercut from Povetkin. But like they weren't the only ones that were putting on these like questionable Top Rank. The reason why Top Rank were pushing I've forgotten his name now. He came from MMA. Clay Collard. Cult hero of Clay Collard, because there's nothing really else going on to shout about. Whereas UFC, they were already planning Fight Island by this point. They'd already put on like Ferguson and Gaethje fight of the year, or one of them in 2020. Sorry. So UFC had the momentum going into last year, but I feel like this year it's kind of gone downhill a little bit. And if boxing finishes with Crawford Spence and Tank and Garcia, it has the upper hand again. But again, those are American shows rather than the UK. I'm just surprised that Matchroom's not putting on. As soon as you're looking global, and they keep on saying that they're looking global, you are naturally not doing as much in your, I guess, your home market. On the Queensbury website, I looked earlier before the show, they haven't got any events listed. They had Joyce Parker, but they've got nothing now. Maybe they might put Fury Joshua together, but it just feels a bit weird, that event. I'm not going to turn it down though. And then with Boxer, they've got Shields Marshall on October 15th that we talked about, Fury Hunter on October 22nd. And that's in Birmingham. So they've got like back-to-back shows in different city territories. And then they've got kind of a mid-tier show featuring Jonas in Manchester. I think that's the month after. So really Boxer's kind of taken a bit of a lead, maybe.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject, just something I was thinking about when I saw that there was nothing to preview, because it was something that was been on my mind, because I was kind of looking at, have we ever really replaced those guys that we kind of, me and you probably grew up with watching, Amir Khan, Anthony Crolla, Carl Froch, David Hay, and a few of the names you said earlier, because those guys were selling out shows. They kind of like bought pay-per-view back, under Carl Froch. And I just don't think that, either of the stables, Frank Warren or Eddie Hearn, really have anyone close to those that we really used to follow.
I mean, Fury and Joshua are killing it really in the UK, and Joyce, I think, has great potential. Whether the public resonate with him as much as they have, and I'm talking the wider public outside of boxing. Joyce could sell a stadium, but I think he'd have to be partnered with Fury. That would be a stadium fight in the UK, or Joshua. But yeah, outside of the heavyweights, I think it's slim pickings. And I don't want to be too critical, but between my picks, I don't think Dennis McCann is going to resonate. I think he's really and you like him as well, but I'm not sure whether he can become Amir Khan, to be an Amir Khan or to be a Kell Brook or a Carl Froch or Joe Calzaghe or Prince Nassim is such a high bar. And I think if you're in the Matchroom stable, I just don't know if they can actually build someone that big, just because they haven't done it in their career history. They've had those fighters, but they brought them in. They didn't build them themselves. I think on their roster, Dalton Smith could be a good shout, but and Gao Yafai, gold medal doesn't help. No, sorry, gold medal does help, obviously. 2-0, 2 knockouts already, and he's already fought at the O2 Arena in Madison Square Garden. But yeah, outside Ben Whittaker, maybe with Boxer and Sky Sports.
Yeah, I mean, especially from his interviews and his style, I think Ben could be. I think if you get a good PR team behind him, I think you'd be right in saying he would be the next one that would get anywhere near close to those guys. the Khans, the Crawlers, Frochis, David Hay.
I think there's a bit of an elephant in the room to address as well. And I'm not sure. I think Matchroom might be feeling it now, how valuable Sky Sports was and is as a partner. I like people at DAZN, and I think anyone who's getting into boxing, I kind of want it to do well, just because that means the sport would be doing well. But they're not Sky Sports, And when you have Sky Sports or ESPN, this isn't just like a Sky Sports thing. When you have a news channel, Eddie Hearn would be going on Sky Sports News, not just Sky Sports when it had Sky Sports 4 or whatever, Sky Sports 2 when it had the boxing on. He would go on Sky Sports News when, football fans would be watching, when rugby fans would be watching the news. And he would then be there with whoever fighter he had at that time to promote a show that was going on that weekend or the weekend after. The shoulder programming that you have with, a broadcaster like Sky Sports or a broadcaster like ESPN, for me, is really, I think we can see now how valuable that is when Matchroom might not be thriving as much as they were when they were with Sky, and how Boxer, very, very new company run by Ben Shalom, who's, I think, 27 years old, very young guy to be doing what he's doing. And, having fighters like Fraser Clark, Vidal Riley, Savannah Marshall, Clarissa Shields and Ben Whittaker, the roster's, decent. But to have Ben Whittaker, if we're just going to isolate him being, the British guy, and, Fraser Clark, he's British as well. It just seems like a natural fit that is going to be their stories and their, fights are going to be better promoted by not the promoter, but by the broadcaster as well. And you're not going to have that on DAZN because they don't have DAZN news, a rolling 24/7 news channel. They don't have anything really outside of their, the content and the TV slots that not TV slots, the sports that they've bought and they're airing. Sometimes they have these, documentaries and things, but they stay on DAZN. And Sky Sports is a kind of a legacy broadcast company that just has more digital real estate that can help, sell a fight.
Yeah, it was interesting because we don't know where DAZN's going to be, 5, 10, 15 years from now. But definitely, the day or the first few years, from leaving Sky Sports to DAZN, I think, Eddie must have realized, they're going to lose, that monster. Sky Sports is literally a monster in the UK for people that are from the US who, it's pretty much the only cable company or satellite company that you have. You have BT Sports, but I wouldn't say that's anywhere near as big as, Sky Sports. and they also did, miss out DAZN, that is, on trying to purchase, BT, and also trying to get the rights to soccer, football in the UK, the Premier League, which is everything really in terms of having cable television at home, because of it being, it's the equivalent of probably owning like the NFL and baseball combined in the US. It's just football is a religion back home, and it's on the front page of the news, it's on the back page of the news. It's just that big.
I think like I mean BT Sport, like with Queensbury, I've heard like the respect that BT Sport has in like American media is really high, but it's mainly because of what they do with the UFC. Just a really, really good broadcast partner for the UFC. They've done quite a few of these short clips that they're so well put together, and they just go viral. Like there was a really good one they did of Habib when he lost his dad and then came back to fight in Abu Dhabi. And it was a cartoon that they put together. It was amazing, and I'm not sure how many people watched that. It would have been millions and millions. And not only does that promote, the fact that they've got it on BT Sport, but it also promotes the fact, it's like, oh, I want to, they might see that in America, and then they'll go see it on ESPN because they can't get it on BT Sport. But it's just a very like effective way of promoting something. But I'm not sure they've put in that much effort with boxing. But I feel like they're in a better space to promote it as a broadcaster than DAZN is.
Yeah, it's interesting, where DAZN's going to be, 5, 10, 15 years from now, with the amount of money they've really, plowed into boxing, over here and in the UK so far, and with probably little to no return. They're probably in the red, if we're being honest, So it's going to be interesting to see, because I'm sure they probably thought by now they would have, some rights to some big spots, in the US and the UK. I'm sure they probably counted on, mopping up probably the UFC in the UK, some type of football package in the UK. Then over here, I think they still have some baseball highlights, but they don't have, any baseball, NBA, NHL, or, NFL over here. So it's interesting, to see what happens when these contracts come up.
I think it's a shame, really, because they do have. I mean, I mentioned like Bivol and Ramirez. I think that's a really good headlining fight in Abu Dhabi. Taraji and Kayaguchi in Japan. These are really good hardcore fights that we should be subscribing to and watching. And that's just the matchroom side. Golden Boy, their USPs is they know how to match make. Some of their cards are, some of their fights are bangers, and but obviously they've got like a natural. Californian fighters naturally gravitate towards Golden Boy. And I think I'll probably shout him out on this show every time. But when I went to their show in March, expecting to see Virgil Ortiz in the headliner, but he ended up pulling out because of illness. And you're kind of thinking, oh, what's going to happen with the card? But then Alexis Rocha and Blair Cobbs, wanted to do their main event. But yeah, there was still, even with that main event, the fans that Rocha had, talking about 5,000 people screaming for him. A really good atmosphere. And speaking to people at Golden Boy, I do get the impression that they're really high on Rocha now. Well, they would have been anyway. But even outside of him, we obviously got Ryan Garcia, really good headliner. These are all people on DAZN. Virgil Ortiz, as I mentioned. I feel like there's one very obvious person that I'm forgetting who's around that age as well. 25 and under, really good star. But anyway, they've got options with both promoters, Golden Boy and Matchroom. But they just, it's just a fact. They just don't have the shoulder, like the Sky Sports News channel that Sky can rely on, or Boxer can rely on now, and Matchroom did once rely on.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Moving on to the news and notes real quick. We've been on here for a lot longer than I expected. Eddie Hearn suing Jake Paul, seeking around 100 million or over 100 million for accusing him of essentially fixing fights.
I mean, what Jake Paul said was, it was spoken, so it was slander rather than written, which is defamation. But he not only said it, but then doubled down on it and did say, "I know what I'm saying is." I'm not sure what word he used, but I know the gravity of what I'm saying is basically what he added to saying that the judge was basically on the books of Matchroom. But when I was reading, it was a 15-page lawsuit that's filed. You can see it in Peso, which is the system that we have over here in the US, and it just the word I don't know. I've been trying to speak to a boxing lawyer because I just want to find out whether it's actually got merit, or because the way that these things are proved are so different in the UK than they are in the US. On the UK, it's on the if you've said it, it's on the you're burdened with trying to prove it, right? Whereas in the US, it's the opposite. The person who's accusing, so in this case, it would be Matchroom and Hearn. They'd have to prove that Jake Paul had malice, when he's saying it. I just feel like all these sort of things, like I kind of forgot Jake Paul said that very quickly, and I feel like it's now part of the media cycle because of the lawsuit. And one of the some of the media that is referenced in the lawsuit. It was said on Jake Paul said it during an interview of IFL TV. It's quite funny because when you read the lawsuit, the headline of IFL, everyone knows what they are. It's all like raw beef, in all capital letters. So it's all spelled out in capital letters. But I don't know. They reference IFL. They're kind of like pro Matchroom media company. And who else did they reference? Boxing Social. And I think since there's been an exodus of talent from Boxing Social, I'm not sure how many people still pay attention to Boxing Social. And the other one was Boxing Scene, which, to be fair, is their trade website and the go-to website. But I think the reason I'm saying that is because just if it was like in the New York Times, Washington Post, ESPN, Sky Sports, might be different. But the fact that it's IFL, Boxing Social, Boxing Scene, it's not left. It's not left the boxing ecosystem, right? No. So how much has it really injured Matchroom's reputation? Because that's one of the things they would be arguing, that it's lowered their reputation in the minds of right-thinking people. That's what like defamation and slander and libel is. But I don't know how highly thought of are Matchroom in the US as well. I feel like there could be a defense there that Lou DiBella has said things this year, Leonard Ellaby has said things this year, Bob Arum I'm sure has said things as well that are very highly critical of Matchroom. So I'm not sure how much damage has really been done to their reputation that really qualifies for $100 million. Like $100 million claim. I feel like it's a lot of money to be able to prove. I don't think Jake Paul's even got that much money. I just remember like when Eddie Hearn was really getting in and when he was really fresh to the game, and he was saying he didn't want to ever be a bitter older promoter who's just going around suing people. I feel like he's kind of turned into what he set out to not want to be, filing a potentially, I don't know if it's frivolous. I've only read it and it didn't. I wanted to find out more, so I'm trying to speak to a few boxing lawyers. So I probably will write about it based on what the legal experts say, rather than what I would say, because I'm not an authority on the actual whether it has any merit. But it just feels like it's a chance to. I don't know. I feel like there's probably something going on between Jake Paul and Eddie Hearn.
To speak to Kurt Emhoff, Esquire. He's been.
Yeah, he would be a good one. Scott Schaefer is another one. There's a few other people. Trying to think. There was somebody who filed a really good reputation. I just had a brain fart. I can't remember the name. He filed the lawsuit with against Don King and the WBA. That was quite recent, alleging funneling of payments to sports consultancy services. And they keep on being this mystery company that keeps on coming up with these sort of cash for rankings. But I've heard him be called like the dean of boxing litigation, not litigation, boxing law, real expert. I can't remember his name though. But yeah, he would be a good one as well. There's a guy called Eric in Canada who's good at combat sports law, but I think he's mainly more on the MMA side. But yeah, there's quite a few experts around in that field. I'll definitely try and get hold of at least one of them.
Floyd Mayweather had his second exhibition on Rising. Went a little longer than the first one. Then he stepped on the gas and knocked out, is it Megumi Azukara at the end of the second round. But he did get hit. He got hit with, there was that shot doing the rounds of him kind of catching one, fresh on the chin. Next up for him, we have, KSI's little brother, I believe. Is it Deji?
I'm not sure. Let's go with that, Deji.
Yeah, so he's fighting him next, who comes in with, I think, was it 1 win and 3 losses?
I thought it was 0. I thought, has he actually won something?
He won one recently on that one that was staged in LA.
Oh, okay.
The one where, no, sorry, I don't think it was in LA. The one where KSI fought 2 fights in one night.
Oh yeah.
I believe he was on there because I think he'd had 2 or 3 fights, lost them, and everyone's like, dude, like, this isn't for you, like, give it up. And then I think he, went away, trained, came back, and actually, had a decent win last time out. But, to then go and fight arguably the best fighter of our generation of, watching boxing in Floyd Mayweather. I just don't know if, is it still selling? It's got to the point now where, it was an exhibition, which is kind of like a, essentially like a one-off thing. Floyd seems to be doing, like
a world tour.
A world tour of just doing it because I think he got paid like a handsomely in Dubai, and it was said, you need us X amount of fights against some names.
It was reportedly 20 million for the recent one in Japan against Asukara. I've got more interest in what he's doing in Japan. So it was Tenshin Nasukara at the end of 2018. I think it was New Year's Eve going into 2019, and he dropped him 3 times and then made him cry. And then beat Asukara in 2 rounds. I've got more interest in seeing these kind of seemingly random shows against MMA, like Japanese MMA fighters on a Rising show than I have. I feel like it's so obscure fighting someone like I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Deji,
Logan Paul, and then his old sparring partner in Mo.
Yeah, I mean, Logan Paul was, I suppose, just because it was a bigger. I mean, I'm not too big on the social media content creator who's actually big. I know obviously Logan Paul, like those guys, but Logan Paul had size. I never thought it was ever going to be competitive. I don't know why I didn't mind that one so much. But like was it Money Kicks he was supposed to fight in Dubai first time round?
That's right. Yeah.
I had little interest in that. And then Don Moore is former sparring partner. I think these ones that are going on in like Dubai are just they seem far weirder from my point of view. Whereas going in and fighting actual MMA fighters, I feel like that can sell a little bit more. That actually intrigues me a little bit, even though I'm guessing we're only going to go in and see like Floyd get hit and then step it up and then put someone away because he outweighs them by 30 pounds. But at least they're an actual fighter. I've got more interest in that than I have, the sort of, let's go and fight a random internet celebrity who's got a very modicum level of, I wouldn't even say talent in combat sports.
Hey, I'm only jealous that he's getting these, huge checks for, doing probably 20% of the work he used to have to do against these, smaller, weaker, less experienced fighters. So, fair play to him.
In the build-up to Asukara on the fight week, he said he didn't even know his opponent's name and he hasn't been training and I'm getting easy money.
Yeah, well, at least he's honest, right?
Yeah.
He's not robbing us now. He's just, telling us at the time, hey, I'm going to take this, and then he's taking it. It's not an art of deception. Last thing to touch on. Tyson Fury, Tyson Fury, Joyce, Tyson Fury, AJ, where do you think we are? And I think Frank Warren stated yesterday that behind the scenes, they are still trying to patch up the last few things and make the Anthony Joshua fight.
Yeah, it does actually sound, both promoters actually seem that they're on the same page with, be a BT Sport DAZN kind of split thing. The broadcast, I did speak to Joe Markowski at DAZN. It was earlier this month, actually, when Canelo was here. And he said at that time that they hadn't really got on with it yet because the promoters were still talking. So that when the talks develop into something more substantial, that's when it will get to the broadcaster point of view. I think it sounds like they're there now and that they're talking about the actual logistics and the broadcasting of it. And the fact that Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn are actually talking similar things, that to me doesn't really happen that much. And it seems like there's something of substance there, and Tyson Fury is just being Tyson Fury, and saying one thing another day, saying another thing tomorrow, and probably next week he'll probably remind us that he once wanked like 8 times in one day and beat up a horse and all this other random stuff. But if it turns into Char, I don't think, if there's an MMA fight on, if there's a UFC event on, I would watch that. And if it's in Vegas, I'd go to it. And I don't think I'd even watch the Tyson Fury thing live. If Tyson Fury AJ, definitely that would be my priority. With Joyce, I think there's enough time really to build that event. I think it's either AJ or bust.
Putting a percent on it, how much do you think that we actually do see, Tyson Fury AJ in what is it, December 3rd, December 13th? I
think it's more likely than not. And I feel like from what Joe Markowski was actually saying, like to me, and this was all on record, it was like, I was saying, is it not quite risky from like yours and Eddie Hearn's point of view, having Anthony Joshua is just like back-to-back losses with Usyk, and now he's going in with, the number one in the division, if not, he's still, had the better pedigree, I guess, at heavyweight than Usyk. It seems, from my point of view, it seems like, how can you go if you're Matchroom and DAZN, and then you've got 2 losses for Joshua to Usyk and then another loss to Fury, and if it's a knockout to Fury, it's going to take a long while to rebuild from that, because you're suddenly nowhere near the top 2 in the division. But they said, the messaging was basically, it's better now than in 2 years or in 3 years, where you might not even get the shot. So I think it seems like, I'm probably more confident that fight happens than Tank and Garcia.
I would agree with it. Reading between the lines, it seems like the people are saying the right things, and I think we've got enough time to to get it made. So fingers crossed we finish the year with a bang. A heavyweight fight like that, and then we're coming into 2023. It's going to be intriguing to see what happens in boxing. We've got a lot of more undisputed fights this year than we've probably ever seen. We're still missing a few of the big fights like Errol Spence and Crawford, the Gervonta Davis and Tank. But, I think we've seen a lot of them. And then also, across the street in MMA, I think, 2023 is probably going to be a huge year. I'm sure Dana White is wanting to make that year, which is the 30th anniversary, something to remember.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that's it, Al. I think we've pretty much dusted up everything in this 4-hour show that we've done this week. If you want to tell everybody where they can find you, all your written pieces, your social media handles.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me at, I've got an author page over at Insider, Business Insider, and but you're more likely to find me over at Twitter, Alan Dawson Sport, all one word. And yeah. I look forward to next time we do this.
OnlyFans page, Alan? No?
I've got several.
Where are you this weekend?
Well, I was going to be at UFC Fight Night, but we were told this week. I mean, I've been trying to get onto that event for at least 2 months. So there's a UFC access page for media, and you can go on there and you apply for your credentials, and then you get it approved or whatever. And this one's always been cut off, and it says no longer taking applications, and it's been like that for at least a month and a half, and I've been messaging them going, what's going on? I want to come to this event. We find out this week there's no media, there's a ban on media, there's no fans. They didn't even have that when it was pandemic era. It was behind closed doors to fans, but there was still media presence. So it's been shrouded in a little bit of mystery, but it turns out Mark Zuckerberg, of all people, has completely hired the whole thing out. So that was confirmed today by Mackenzie Dern, jiu-jitsu player, who's headlining the show. And the kind of rumor is that it might be like an Oculus VR type experiment. I would be going to that normally, but I'm intrigued to see what it is from home. But I still would have liked, if they're not going to put us on the floor, at least keep the media in the media room. Did you see today that Dana White replied to something and put that's total bullshit to Mackenzie Dern, saying that Mark Zuckerberg had... I hadn't actually seen that. That's spicy. Yeah, I saw it here. That's total bullshit. Dana White continues to deny Mark Zuckerberg rumors after Mackenzie Dern's recent comment. So it's going to be interesting. Is he just trying to stop any media presence outside that may try to catch Mark Zuckerberg coming in by denying it?
I think the initial thing that when people came, the thing that I saw, everyone thought it was going to be old Donald Trump was going to turn up, and that's why there was going to be no media there to kind of protect Donald.
I mean, they've had Donald Trump at one of the New York shows. I think it was also at the BMF fight with Masvidal and Diaz. And Trump at the time was happy enough to not obviously be in the crowd, but he walked, just like to his seat, and he was there with other members of the Trump family. I think if you were a Donald Trump and you were coming to an MMA or a UFC show, because granted, him and Dana are close, or we're told by both that they're close, and they both seem to speak really highly of one another. It seems like a very weird, even from a Facebook point of view, no matter if it's Trump or, which I don't think it is, I think it's more likely to be a meta thing with Zuckerberg. It seems like a very weird show to experiment with it on, because it's not the best fight night event at the Apex. I think it's quite I think it's only about 8 fights, but maybe that's why they're experimenting with this one, because it's like a low key or a lower key event than other ones. But with Trump, I'm sure he could pick a far better show to come in on. I think the next pay-per-view is in Abu Dhabi next month. The month after that, where would that be? November. That's in New York. That kind of makes sense for him, being a New Yorker. And then at the end of the year, back in Vegas. So I would have thought if he was going to come to a show, the New York one in November would have made more sense.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if it's not Mark Zuckerberg. Who is this special guest, or what are they doing? Behind closed doors that they don't want media and fans to see. But yeah, thanks again, Al, for joining us. I'm sure you'll be on again soon, and I'm hopefully catch you up with you next time I'm in Vegas or you're in California.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it. Thanks,
you can find us at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter, and be sure to join us next week where we'll be previewing and reviewing all the latest fights. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last